It is such a slippery slope from compassion to empathy to codependency, and the key difference is boundaries. If you grew up in households where emotions weren't safe, the emotional state of your parents or caregivers were very unpredictable, and your emotions and feelings were very rarely respected and they were often rejected, this sets the stage for you developing codependent behaviors as an adult. Because as a child, you became hyper attuned to the emotional state of everyone around you, whilst at the same time learning to suppress your needs and your emotions. And this is where the blueprint for our attachment injuries also come into play, our insecure attachment styles, anxious, avoidant, be it dismissive or fearful. So you may have been with one parent or both parents that were very emotionally volatile. You may have been in a situation where love felt very conditional. You may have been praised for being the good kid, the one that was taking care of everyone else, and the kid that never needed too much. So you received praise for suppressing everything, for not complaining, for not telling your parents if you felt sick. So suppressing literally everything, and that's what gave you praise. So you learnt over time that the less of me I am, the more these people will love me. So growing up in environments like this, you learn to track moods, you learn to become hyper attuned to the emotional state of everyone around you. You might be the one that has to smooth things over, keep the peace, be the parent to your siblings, even your parents. And you essentially learn that your value comes from how well you can suppress your needs and give to everyone around you. And you become a pro at managing everyone else's emotions, whilst at the same time being completely unaware and unattuned to your emotions. Welcome, anxious and fearful avoidance. So in childhood, it was a survival strategy that you developed. In adulthood, it becomes a self-sabotaging, self-abandoning behavior that leads to codependent relationships, be it romantic relationships, friendships, the relationship that you have with your family. So then you become an adult who says yes to everything, even when you want and need to say no. You stay in relationships way longer than you should out of guilt and responsibility, even if they are so draining and so emotionally harmful to you. You end up being the rescuer in so many relationships or the parent of your partner. And you feel so guilty for wanting or thinking about pulling back or walking away. If this is happening, that is a huge warning light that your nervous system is sending you that you need to start choosing yourself. And how we begin to heal and create a healthy environment and deliver some self-compassion to us is boundaries. Welcome back to the Reconnection Co, where healing starts with reconnection. Today's episode is for anyone who struggles with guilt or confusion around setting boundaries or even walking away, whether or not it's from an ex, a partner, a parent, or a longtime friend. Now, in today's episode, we're going to explore the difference between empathy, compassion, and codependency, and why it's easy to get them confused and why boundaries are so important in these. And moving on from boundaries is giving a little bit of insight into how and why trauma survivors are often the ones who end up overgiving and feeling immense guilt for setting boundaries. And then I want to give some insights into how we can practice compassion that includes ourselves, especially in some of the more difficult relationships that we might experience. And in order for us to have a little bit of an understanding of if we are overgiving, I'm going to go through a couple of examples of what overgiving looks and feels like and why it can lead to us feeling so emotionally burnt out. And then wrapping things up, I want to hopefully give you some insights into how you can learn to hold on, but also let go without hardening or self-abandoning. Now, there's a different type of grief that will often hit in the later stages of healing from a relationship that wore you down or even broke you. And it often comes when you look at someone and think, I care about you so much, but being close to you is slowly killing me. And that's often the heartbreak of healing. It's the space where you can find love and pain sitting side by side. And for many of us with a trauma history, it can be so confusing and, to be honest, quite destructive. Now, either in childhood or in some of our other meaningful adult relationships, when we are guilty of overgiving, whatever the relationship that led to that developing, you were probably taught, not always directly, but through patterns, that love means sacrifice, that if you care, you stay, that if you're loyal, you will absorb, that if you walk away, you are selfish, cold, or ungrateful. So when you find yourself needing to step back from someone that you still love and care about, whether it's a current partner, whether it's an ex-partner, a parent, a sibling, an old friend, whoever it is, you can feel immense guilt and you can almost feel like a failure or you're doing wrong by this person. But in doing that, it's not a failure, it's growth. Because the truth is, real love, real emotional maturity, when this is present, it means sometimes it's having the understanding that sometimes, because the truth is, real love, real emotional maturity sometimes means loving someone from a distance. It means saying, I see your pain, but I won't keep betraying myself to hold what's not mine. It means recognizing that you can care without staying close. It means that you can wish them well and wish them healing without being their lifeline. And that's not cold, it's not cruel. That is what happens when you stop confusing self-abandonment with love. So if being close to someone means silencing your needs, tolerating repeated harm, or constantly managing their chaos, then that closeness is no longer care. It is self-abandonment. And that essentially puts you in survival mode. And you're allowed to stop existing in survival mode. As I've said before, you cannot thrive when you're doing all that you can to survive. So you're allowed to let go even when you still care. Because the truth is, you can love someone and still choose peace. You can forgive them and still walk away. And you can care deeply, but still close the door gently. Now, the thing that stops that slippery slope from compassion to self-abandonment is boundaries. But before we get there, I think it's important for us to explore the nuance between empathy, compassion, and codependency, because it might allow the opportunity to see where you may have or may be giving or overgiving in some of your either previous or current relationships. So compassion is essentially empathy with boundaries. It's appreciating someone's emotional experience and responding with care without taking on the emotions yourself and without losing yourself in the emotional experience of someone else. So you can stay present but grounded, caring but clear. Empathy, on the other hand, empathy, whilst it is an admirable trait and something I very much value myself, but I, as have many of you, have probably learnt the hard way that connecting with empathy without boundaries can leave you overwhelmed and enmeshed. So empathy is feeling what someone else feels. You sense their pain, you resonate with it, you may even absorb it. Now, where childhood trauma and other relationships where you may have developed survival mechanisms centered around hyper-awareness and the emotional states of others and suppressing your own emotional state, this is where you can often develop the codependent behaviours, the self-sacrificing empathetic behaviours, caring to the point that it erodes you. So when this happens, you will often stop at nothing to help fix, to help please, or even to go into that rescue mode with other people around you. And your worth can often become tied into how needed you are. Okay, so let's talk about what codependency can actually look like, because it's not always messy or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like being reliable, like always picking up the phone, like being the one who never complains and never needs anything from anyone in return. But depending on the relationship, codependency can wear different masks. So let's say with family, maybe it's the surge in anxiety that you get leading into Sunday lunch or going to Christmas lunch or whatever it is. You know that irrespective of what you do, there is going to be something that happens that leaves you feeling worse for the experience. But you show up again. Even though last time your mum made that passive-aggressive comment about your choices, your brother dismissed you in front of everyone, you smiled, you changed the subject, and you just swallowed it down. And you'll do it again next time because they're family. But the truth is, you leave every time feeling smaller, like your voice doesn't matter, like your presence is expected, but never really seen, respected, or acknowledged. And deep down, you are just scared that if you finally set a boundary, you'll be labelled ungrateful. Or you may have previously set boundaries before or attempted to set boundaries and been met with immense protest behaviours from your family and perhaps being labelled as like too selfish or too sensitive. And essentially what happens is you end up just shrinking, making yourself smaller to fit back into that mould. And what we need to remember is if you do this, it's not just keeping the peace. That's codependency. You're sacrificing your truth and your boundaries to preserve that false sense of family unity. You're staying silent to be the good one, to be amenable. But underneath all of that, you're communicating to yourself that love means enduring discomfort, that loyalty means betraying yourself. Now, what can codependency look like in a romantic relationship? So maybe you're in love with someone who is emotionally unavailable. They keep pulling away. They're engaging in a lot of this hot, cold, push-pull behavior, and they just completely shut down when things get real, when you get vulnerable, or if you have some needs. Let's just say that you are sick or you have a stressful event going on in your life, and that's the point in time when a partner needs to show up, but they shut down. Or they may lash out when they're overwhelmed. And sometimes you never know which version of them you're going to get. And still, you stay. You tell yourself, they've just been through a lot. I know that they're struggling. They're trying. They just need more patience. So you make excuses, you manage their moods, you walk on eggshells and try not to trigger them. You read every text 3 times before replying, just to make sure that you're not saying anything that may set them off or make them withdraw. Now, for many of us, this may have felt like love, but it is not. It is rescuing, it is folding your boundaries, it is suppressing your needs, it is shrinking yourself in order to make the emotional environment more stable for you because you're trying to control the volatility of the other person. It's rescuing, it's trying to earn safety by being endlessly understanding, endlessly shrinking yourself. And in the process, you lose not only your sense of peace, but your sense of self. So some of the codependent patterns that show up in this example, it's like you're taking on their healing and their chaos as your job to regulate that, to process that, to fix that, even if it's not a conscious action that you are doing. Another thing that is happening is often you are equating your worth to how much of their shit that you can tolerate. Now, it's not just in a romantic relationship that codependency can show up, it can still very much show up with an ex. Let's just say that you have an ex that you have not seen or heard from in days, weeks, months, or even years. They hurt you immensely. They may have abruptly ended the relationship with you, offered little to no closure, and left you dysregulated as hell and essentially made you feel like you have been completely obliterated and erased from existence. But now they're back, with no accountability, with no apology, with no acknowledgement of anything that they may have done. They are just back with sadness, regret, maybe a little bit of confusion, and they are looking for you to regulate their current emotional state. And even when your gut says, God, no, don't reply, you do. You comfort them, you check in, you try and soften the ache for them. Oftentimes not because you want them back, but because it often feels wrong to ignore their pain, because the silence feels unbearable. It's almost like rejection in reverse. But here's the thing, like I said, it isn't reconnection. It's you caretaking. It is you providing that external source of emotional regulation that they are seeking because they are often unable to self-regulate their emotions. So they look to externally outsource this. God, think about what happens after an abrupt breakup. People will throw themselves into work, they'll throw themselves into the gym, they will throw themselves into a rebound relationship without sitting with the emotions and processing the breakup. This is when people are using external things to regulate their internal emotional state. And when you get these text messages, again, with no accountability, no acknowledgement, no apology, this is external regulation seeking. So if you respond and you do not do anything to hold them accountable, you are falling into that codependent trap. You are soothing their hurt at the expense of your own healing journey. So some of the codependent thoughts that might be bubbling away subconsciously, it's like, if I stop being needed by them, I'll be forgotten. If I pull away, I'm the bad one for leaving them when they're upset. So you keep orbiting their grief instead of protecting your peace. And it's not just in family relationships and romantic relationships that codependency can show up. It can happen with our friendships as well. So with friends, if you are someone who you're always the one who is initiating the communication, always organising the catch-ups, and every crisis, every relationship meltdown, every spiral they have, you're their person. They vent, they process, they cry, but somehow they never ask about you. And you may notice that after every call or every interaction, that you're often left feeling emotionally wiped out. And still, the next time that they need you, the next time they message, the next time they call you having a crisis, you're there because they're going through a lot. But the thing that no one sees, but you 100% feel, is you're running on fumes. You're giving more than you have. You are pouring from an empty cup. Sometimes codependency in friendships can be staying in a one-sided friendship out of guilt, not connection. Believing that your worth is tied to being the low-maintenance friend, which also ties into being the low-maintenance girlfriend or boyfriend or the low-maintenance sibling or child. And oftentimes it leaves you feeling like a burden if you ask for some reciprocity in the care that you give those around you. So with codependency, it's very important for us to remember that if your care keeps costing you, it's not compassion, it is self-abandonment and self-erasure. Okay, so how did we get there? How does trauma train us to overfeel and overgive? So if you grew up in a household where emotions weren't safe, your caregiver's emotions were very unpredictable, and your emotions were very rarely respected, you probably became hyper attuned to everyone else's feelings. You had to. Maybe one parent was quite emotionally volatile. Maybe love was very conditional. Maybe you were praised for being the good kid, the one who never needed too much. So essentially you got praise for suppressing who you are and your emotional state. So when you are growing up in these environments, you learn to track moods, learn to smooth things over, and you often end up feeling responsible for keeping the peace. And you learnt that your value came from how well you could manage other people's emotions. That's not empathy, that's emotional hyper-responsibility. It's a survival skill, and that's what leads to codependency in adults. Not the only thing, but it is one of the big drivers. And it works in childhood, it does keep you safe. But in adulthood, it becomes a trap. It becomes that codependent pattern because suddenly you're saying yes when you mean no. You're staying in relationships that drain you. You're staying in relationships that hurt you. You're rescuing people who never asked or never changed. And you feel guilty for even thinking about pulling back. And this is how trauma trains you to overfeel and overgive, because it wires your nervous system to prioritize the emotions of other people around you over your safety. And it makes silence, distance, or saying no feel dangerous, even when it is the healthiest thing that you could be doing. But here's what I want you to know. When you are feeling guilt, if you are wanting or feeling like you need to pull back, that guilt isn't truth. You are not doing something wrong. It is programming. And healing is learning that your job is not to absorb everyone else's pain, especially not at the cost of your own peace. And here's why having an understanding of all of this is quite important. It's because trauma has taught us that love means proximity, even if the proximity is in proximity to harm. It teaches you that if you are compassionate, you stay, even if it's harmful, that you just give, you understand, even when it is killing you and draining you. But real compassion doesn't mean self-abandonment. It doesn't mean erasing your boundaries because someone else is hurting. Real compassion includes you. And to be honest, it should start with you. It says, I see your pain, but I can't participate in my own harm in order to help you feel better. It says, I love you, but I'm allowed to choose my peace over this chaos. And it says, you matter, but so do I. So you don't have to prove your compassion by being available. You don't have to soften your boundaries in order to keep your heart open. And you don't have to stay in the story just in the hope that someone might heal. You can care and you can still let go. You can have compassion and still close the door. So there's a couple of ways that we can practice compassion with boundaries. First is even just like checking what the cost of your compassion is. So am I showing up for this person at the cost of my peace, my safety, my energy, or my clarity? Compassion that depletes you isn't sustainable, and it's not fair to either of you. Now, another thing to really practice, and it's not just for compassion, it's just for good relationships in general, is pause before you respond. So say you've received a text message from someone or a phone call, and you can let the phone call go through to voicemail. You don't have to reply to every message in the moment. You don't have to answer every phone call. You are allowed to give your nervous system space to assess, is this something that I have the bandwidth to handle right now? Is this my responsibility to deal with? If the answer is no, you don't have to reply to the message straight away. You don't have to answer the phone. Another way that we can practice self-compassion especially, but just compassion in general with boundaries, is stopping ourselves from folding our boundaries because someone else is in pain. So just because someone is experiencing pain, again, you can feel for their situation, but you don't have to feel their situation. So their pain is real, but so is your right to protect yourself. You do not have to take it on. Now, we can use compassionate no language. So it's like, I care, but I can't be part of this right now, or I can't help you. I hope you can find support, but I can't be that person for you anymore. So one thing, or one of the most important things, is include yourself in every decision that you make when it comes to how much you are going to be giving. If your compassion excludes you, it's not compassion, that is self-abandonment. So when you've grown up learning to tune into everyone else's needs and suppress your own, it makes perfect sense that boundaries can feel so incredibly foreign. And the guilt that comes with wanting boundaries feels automatic. And wanting to walk away or create distance can feel cruel. But the truth is, you can still care about someone and choose the distance that is healthy for you, because real compassion needs to include you. Now, if this episode resonated with you, the best thing that you can do to support the platform is to like, subscribe, share with anyone who may benefit from this, and drop a 5-star rating on Spotify if that's where you're listening to this. I will also have the companion guided journaling session available on the YouTube channel playlist. And as always, thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.